You've probably heard of the Victorian era or Victorian English, maybe Victorian architecture. It's this very special and unique period of time, and it references the period of time in which Queen Victoria was the queen. So 19th century, later 19th century. And so what I want to do is share a short video of someone who speaks Victorian English from that era, is explaining their childhood or their younger years. There's this older lady who was interviewed in the 1970s, who's 108 years old, born in the 19th century, speaking that very unique style of very formal, clear style of British English. What I'd like to do then as we go through it is kind of say, this is how I would say these things. So we can kind of compare and contrast. I think it is very interesting, but I want to then point out, if I were going to say what she's saying, how would I say it? And we can see some differences between that sort of classical British Victorian English and modern American English. This does not mean that people in the UK speak like she does. In fact, they don't. The Queen might, but I think very few people actually talk like this lady does. This interview is from, I believe, 1977. So let's check it out.
In Paris, nothing mattered. But I'm speaking of years before that. Years. When I suppose I was about 10.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the first one. I suppose I was about 10. That is actually something that people would say sometimes. And again, we're comparing this sort of Victorian English to modern sort of American English. I would usually say, I guess I was about 10. I might say once in a while, I suppose I was about 10. It's not incorrect to say it. People do say it. I just think it's less common than I guess. I guess I was about 10. I suppose I was about 10.
Yes.
There was a cartoon in Punch.
I don't even know what that means. A cartoon in Punch. Maybe it's a sort of in the newspaper, or I don't know what that means.
Old-fashioned bus with the seats going parallel with the bus.
Oh, a bus.
In Paris, nothing mattered. But I'm speaking of years before that. Years. When I suppose I was about...
I think Florence is also not a super common name anymore. I do know someone named Florence, but actually she calls herself Flo instead of Florence. I don't think it's particularly common.
10.
Yes.
There was a cartoon in Punch of the old-fashioned bus with
Old-fashioned bus. Okay.
seats
Old-fashioned is common.
going parallel with the bus. And all the men going like this.
Yes. What were they looking for?
There was a woman crossing the road.
I love how she uses the R's. Those rolling R's are amazing. There was a woman crossing the road. It's so great. It's so great. I wish that was something that people actually did. I mean, even British English, that I think has maybe completely died out. You see it like in older TV shows. If you watch Downton Abbey, you get that sort of there it is, that road sort of rolling tongue thing. But it's nowhere in American English, except maybe that the sound that Cardi B makes. She does that sort of rolling sound. Maybe she's bringing it back. Cardi B is bringing back the tongue roll. Awesome.
And holding her dress up and showing her ankle to there.
Oh.
Tut. Florence.
She says tut, meaning like unbelievable. She's doing that sarcastically. because back then that was considered a risque thing. In England, she said before, in Paris, nothing mattered. But in England, people were a little bit more conservative, and someone showed their ankles in public. That's very, ooh.
So it was difficult.
Oh, for women, shockingly difficult.
Okay, there's one. Shockingly difficult. Again, it's kind of like, I guess and I suppose, you might hear someone say shockingly, as an adverb. Shockingly beautiful, shockingly difficult, shockingly hard, right? But I think more often, most people are just going to say very, or really, or extremely instead. Because very and really, sometimes you get bored of saying those. You don't want to say very difficult. Extremely difficult is fine. Maybe even better to say that. Extremely. I would say extremely is far more common than shockingly, and maybe extremely has replaced shockingly, because they're kind of the same meaning. Oh, it's very, 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 right? So shockingly, extremely, I think are similar, but extremely it's much more common. I use it a lot.
I can tell you a story about that. That was also, I think, in Punch.
Punch? What is she saying? Punch? What is that?
A scraggy woman seated in a chair, little girl playing on the floor, about 4 years old, and an awful-looking man this side in an armchair. Mother, when I grow up, shall I have to be married?
Okay. Shall I have to be married? That is definitely sort of a Victorian English phrase. To my ears, it sounds extremely formal. And I would say instead, Mother, when I grow up, will I have to get married? To be married is something that you are. In more modern sort of American English, we would say, I am married. They are married, right? When it happens, when you talk about it in the future, or even in the past, the event itself, we use instead of be, we use get. They're going to get married next year. We got married last year. So maybe this would be, will I have to get married? Instead of should I have to be married? Will I have to get married? Do I, could also be okay, have to get married? Shall I sounds old-fashioned to me. Shall I would be a standalone question, right? Where we're standing here and it's time to go and someone says, well, shall we? Shall we means let's go. So we still use the word shall, but it's often used in that standalone question style. Shall we go? Shall we leave? Shall we? Just that by itself, more often than a whole sentence as a question. Shall we prepare for da-da-da-da? There we might say, can we prepare for the da-da-da? Or, do you think we should prepare for the da-da-da-da? Or maybe should we would be okay. Should also has replaced shall in a lot of situations.
Yes, dear. Shall I have to marry a man like father?
Again, shall I?
Yes, dear.
Also, I don't know of any, very few probably, American kids who call their parents mother and father, unless they're talking about them like my. So they might say my mother, my father. But you would only use my mother and my father when you're not talking to someone who knows them. And if you're talking to someone in your family, then you would say mother, father. But that would be the old-fashioned sort of way of doing it. There you would then probably say in American English, mom, dad. So that's an interesting one. That's also an interesting difference between English and Chinese. If you're talking to your mother about your father, you would say, my father. But in English, we would just say father, or, more common, dad. But you would say my mother, my father, when they don't know your mother or father. You're talking to them about this person they are not aware of. They don't know, they've never met them. My mother was very strict. My father was very strict. I'm not saying that about my mother and father. They weren't. But That's what you would say to someone else who's never met them. Hope that makes sense. I would usually say my mom and my dad. Mom, dad. Mom, dad. Now, British English, modern British English, I think they would maybe still use mother and father, maybe a little more common, but it would be for mom, instead of M-O-M, it would be M-U-M, mum, mum. And I think they use dad as well. I think it's the same spelling, D-A-D. Someone can correct me on that. But mum, M-U-M, and mom, M-O-M, for American English is M-O-M.
And if I don't marry him, shall I be an old maid like Aunt Eliza?
That would be, then she's sort of changing it. That would be, will I be an old maid? An old maid is someone who's not married, who never got married, and it's kind of a pathetic thing at this time.
Yes, dear. Silence for me.
She's a good storyteller.
Say, Mother, it's a hard world for us women, isn't it?
Do we use say when we start it? Say, Mother. That was actually common in America up until maybe the 1960s or something. If you watch old TV shows from the 1950s, people use say as an interjection. Say, that's pretty interesting. Say, do you think we should... That would be something that you would use to start off a comment or start off a question or express an emotion. Now we would say, huh, wow, so, well, that sort of thing. So, well, and sometimes, wow, if it's a sense of excitement or used as an excited interjection. Here exactly where she says,
say, Mother.
There it might be, hey, Mom. Hey, Mom.
It's a hard world for us women.
It's hard work for us women. Hey, Mom. That would be, hey, Mom. Say, Mother. Victorian English. American English, hey, Mom.
Have you ever been in an aeroplane?
Never.
Would you like to?
I shouldn't mind now, but I wouldn't when...
There, shouldn't mind now. Most people, I would say, I wouldn't mind now. Wouldn't instead of shouldn't. Wouldn't mind. It's a hypothetical. Hypothetical situation. It's not the case. I wouldn't mind. Not saying I will go on an airplane, but I wouldn't mind. It's an okay idea.
When I first came in, I never fancied them.
Oh, okay. I never fancied that. I've never used that in my entire life. To fancy, I quite fancy that, right? To fancy something is to like it or enjoy it or to be interested in that, right? I fancy British cinema or British comedy. I like it. In American English, modern American English, no, we don't use that. Modern American English is something like, I like it, I enjoy it, I'm interested in that. I was never interested in flying. I never liked flying. I never wanted to fly. Those sorts of common phrases, I've never used fancy in my entire life in that way. As an adjective, it's common. Ooh, that's very fancy. A thing that is very above what it needs to be, maybe very expensive and has a lot of extra features. Ooh, very fancy, very fancy. As an adjective, common. To fancy something, not common, not common.
But I would now because I'm more venturesome.
Adventuresome.
I think you've been very adventurous.
Now notice the younger interviewer says adventurous, and this lady says adventuresome. So that highlights a perfect difference between, there's basically the same word, right? Adventuresome and adventurous. Adventuresome and adventurous. Which one would you guess is the one that's in modern usage? Adventurous, for sure. That's British English, American English, adventurous. Adventuresome is pretty outdated. It sounds to me like Victorian English. I might read that in Sherlock Holmes or something. Quite adventuresome. Okay, so that's just a matter of the ending changing a little, but the basic word being the same.
Right through your life. What's the biggest change of all you've seen?
The biggest change? Everything.
I love how she says that. It's so great. Everything. I wish this lady was my grandma.
All you've seen.
The biggest change, everything. Nothing is the same. Everything is changed.
Yeah, well, there you go. Okay, so there you have it. Victorian English. And this has got to be fairly authentic. I mean, it's hard to get a real recording of Victorian English, right? Because we don't have as much video or audio as we do for modern English. So being able to hear that from someone who's actually growing up during the Victorian era, actually learning to speak in that way, I think is fascinating. To get to hear that and compare it to modern English, I find to be an interesting exercise. If you have any questions about this, let me know. Also, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to like, hit the thumbs up, and subscribe. You can also check out my full English courses. If you are serious about your English and looking to improve, check out my full English courses in the links in the description.